Stop. Don't scroll.
Because the golden boy of the Beckham family just blinked, and the entire empire shifted. Brooklyn Beckham, the heir, the headline magnate, the once untouchable prince of legacy, is suddenly looking less like royalty, and more like a man who just lost the keys to his own kingdom.
What changed? One name.
Nelson Peltz.
The billionaire titan. The silent strategist.
The man who doesn't enter rooms, he acquires them. And ever since Nikola Peltz's father stepped into the picture, something feels different. Why did Brooklyn Beckham's tone change overnight?
Had my family been in the press lately? I haven't noticed that at all.
Why did family dinners turn into scheduled communications? Why are insiders whispering about contracts, control, and quiet power plays behind mansion walls? Coincidence? Or corporate-level chess disguised as a love story? Because here's what nobody's saying out loud. When you marry into an empire that measures loyalty and leverage, you don't just gain a family.
You sign into a system.
And right now, the internet is asking one explosive question. Did Brooklyn Beckham step into independence, or did he just walk into a billionaire's blueprint?
Buckle up, because this isn't just drama.
This feels engineered.
My advice is stay the hell out of the press. I mean, so how much good did that do? But, that my daughter and the Beckhams are a whole other story. But I'll tell you, my daughter is great. My son-in-law, Brooklyn, is great. And I look forward to them having a long, happy marriage.
The thing about empires is this: they don't collapse loudly. They shift quietly. And that's exactly what started happening inside the Beckham family. At first, it was subtle. Brooklyn Beckham stopped showing up to legacy events.
The charity galas. The anniversary dinners.
The carefully curated family appearances where smiles were sharper than diamonds and every photo screamed unity. Instead, he was spotted across the country, at Peltz family estate gatherings,
private investor brunches.
And particularly with your family. Your daughter recently has been...
Had my family been in the press lately? I haven't noticed that at all.
But I just wonder, from your perspective, if you've been able to, you offer your family any advice on how to navigate such situations?
I do. I do.
Strategy dinners where billion-dollar acquisitions were discussed between courses. Coincidence? Or relocation of allegiance? Because when Brooklyn Beckham married Nikola Peltz, it wasn't just a wedding.
It was a merger. Two powerful families. Two completely different value systems.
One built on image, loyalty, and generational branding. The other built on leverage, silence, and cold, calculated moves. David Beckham built an empire with discipline. Victoria Beckham built one with perception. Together, they manufactured a legacy that felt untouchable. But Nelson Peltz?
He doesn't build brands. He builds power structures.
And insiders, oh yes, insiders are talking, say Nelson Peltz never viewed Brooklyn Beckham as an equal partner.
More like a variable.
A young man still finding himself.
Let's pause right there.
Because finding yourself is cute at 19. It's not cute when you're entering a billionaire's ecosystem where stability is currency. Brooklyn Beckham's career path had already raised eyebrows long before this feud ignited. 1 month photography. Next month culinary ventures. Then lifestyle branding. Then digital creative direction.
Then something else.
Reinvention isn't a crime.
But inconsistency?
In elite circles, inconsistency equals risk. And risk is not something Nelson Peltz tolerates. So when Brooklyn Beckham began distancing himself from the Beckham family, publicly, emotionally, strategically, some say it wasn't rebellion.
It was repositioning. Remember the wedding? Of course you do.
The dance floor moment that insiders claim shifted the temperature in the room.
What was supposed to be romantic became symbolic.
What was meant to unite instead divided.
Energy changed. Lines drawn.
And from that night forward, something fractured. But here's what makes this more than just family tension. Communication.
Or rather, the lack of it.
Sources close to the Beckham circle whisper that conversations with Brooklyn Beckham became structured.
No spontaneous calls. No casual check-ins.
Everything filtered.
Everything delayed.
Everything feeling rehearsed. When family dialogue starts sounding like a board meeting, something has changed. And then came the public statements.
Brooklyn Beckham stepping forward. Standing firm. Declaring independence. Declaring control. Declaring he was done living under anyone's shadow. Strong words. Powerful words. But critics were quick to notice something interesting. His language shifted. Less emotional, more strategic. Less reactive. More polished.
Almost as if
Someone coached him through the optics.
now before you scream conspiracy, let's stay grounded.
Influence doesn't have to be villainous. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's proximity.
And when your new inner circle consists of corporate tacticians who think 5 moves ahead, your tone changes.
Your posture changes.
Your decisions?
They start aligning with a larger system.
Meanwhile, back inside the Beckham world, silence grew heavier. David Beckham, the global icon who built his name brick by brick, reportedly refused to escalate publicly. Victoria Beckham, ever the image architect, kept her composure flawless.
But absence speaks.
Brooklyn Beckham's siblings?
Still anchored. Still attending events. Still integrated.
Which raises the uncomfortable question no one wants to say too loudly. If the system was so controlling, why did only one person walk away? And why did he walk straight into another structured empire? Because here's the real psychological twist.
Freedom isn't just about leaving control. It's about not replacing it.
And since integrating into the Peltz family orbit, Brooklyn Beckham's world appears narrower. Public appearances? Mostly Peltz adjacent. Business ventures? Reportedly discussed within Peltz advisory circles. Social sphere?
Shifted dramatically.
Again, this isn't accusation. It's pattern recognition. Nelson Peltz doesn't shout.
He observes. He assesses. He invests where he sees long-term return.
And those who know his corporate history say one thing consistently: he values structure over sentiment.
Results over romance.
So when Brooklyn Beckham publicly severed visible ties with the Beckham family, some analysts described it as emotional.
Others described it as bold. But a few?
They described it as strategically irreversible. Because once you distance yourself from a legacy machine that powerful, re-entry isn't simple.
Reputation isn't just what people say about you. It's positioning.
And Brooklyn Beckham's positioning shifted overnight. From heir apparent
To wild card.
from dynasty prince.
To dependent variable inside a billionaire orbit. Is that dramatic?
Maybe.
But perception drives narrative.
And narrative drives reputation.
Right now, online commentary is split down the middle. Team independence versus team influence.
Was Brooklyn Beckham finally standing up for himself? Or was he unknowingly stepping into a far more controlled environment, one where contracts matter more than emotions and optics matter more than origin? Because the truth about power is this: it doesn't need to yell.
It just needs to surround.
And the deeper Brooklyn Beckham integrates into the Peltz family system, the more one unsettling thought lingers. Did he escape a dynasty? Or did he just exchange one throne room for another boardroom? And if you think this is just celebrity gossip, wait until you hear what insiders are hinting about the internal restructuring happening behind closed doors.
Because according to whispers,
This story isn't just about reputation.
it's about control.
And control, once transferred, is rarely given back willingly. Inside the Peltz estate, power doesn't shout.
It recalibrates.
And according to whispers floating through private investor lounges and gated garden parties, recalibration is exactly what happened the moment Brooklyn Beckham fully embedded himself into the Peltz family. Because here's where the story gets
Uncomfortable.
multiple close sources, the kind who claim to refill champagne glasses while overhearing billion-dollar conversations, insist that Brooklyn Beckham's life didn't just change emotionally.
It changed structurally.
Suddenly, meetings that once revolved around creative exploration began sounding more like performance reviews.
Suddenly, brand launches were delayed.
Strategies were refined.
Public messaging tightened.
And Brooklyn Beckham's once free-flowing, slightly chaotic career experiments?
They started appearing streamlined.
Now, is that mentorship?
Or management. That depends on who you ask.
One anonymous insider, let's call him Mr. Black Tie, told us, Nelson doesn't believe in accidents.
Everyone around him has a function.
If you're in the room, you're part of the structure.
A function.
Let that word sink in. Because in corporate ecosystems,
Functions are evaluated. Optimized. Sometimes replaced.
and ever since Brooklyn Beckham's integration into Peltz territory, online critics have started noticing something subtle but powerful. His public image feels curated differently.
Less playful. More polished. Less spontaneous. More calculated.
Coincidence?
Or brand alignment.
Meanwhile, behind the scenes, rumors began circulating about alignment discussions.
Not fights. Not arguments. discussions, conversations about long-term positioning, about legacy relevance, about market value. Yes, market value.
Because here's the harsh truth nobody wants to say on camera. In elite circles, even love stories have economic optics. And when Brooklyn Beckham distanced himself from the Beckham family, he didn't just walk away from Sunday dinners. He walked away from one of the most recognizable legacy machines on the planet. That's not emotional. That's strategic risk. Social media noticed. Clips resurfaced. Old interviews replayed. Moments where Brooklyn Beckham praised the Beckham family. Moments where he described loyalty. Now contrasted with firm declarations of independence. The internet did what it always does. It connected dots. And suddenly hashtags began trending. #BeckhamCrack, #Empire Swap, #Who Controls Brooklyn Hyperbole? Of course. But perception moves faster than truth. And then came the whispers about advisory involvement. According to alleged leaked conversations, and we stress alleged, Nelson Peltz began offering guidance on Brooklyn Beckham's public direction. Not demands. Guidance. Because billionaires rarely demand. They suggest. And suggestions from men who control global investment portfolios carry weight. One unnamed event planner even hinted that future Beckham-linked invitations were quietly declined, not dramatically, but strategically. A shift. A cooling. A repositioning. At the same time, Brooklyn Beckham's appearances alongside the Peltz family increased. Private art galas. Ultra-exclusive business retreats. Think less red carpet. More boardroom. And every time Brooklyn Beckham appeared beside Nelson Peltz, analysts couldn't help but notice the dynamic. Nelson silent. Observing. Brooklyn Beckham attentive. Listening. Is that mentorship? Or hierarchy? Now here's where it gets juicier. A so-called internal branding review reportedly took place within Peltz advisory circles, evaluating how Brooklyn Beckham's public persona aligned with long-term empire optics. No confirmation. No documentation. Just whispers. But whispers in elite spaces are currency. One social strategist allegedly remarked, "If Brooklyn wants longevity inside this world, unpredictability isn't sustainable." Unpredictability. There it is again. The word that keeps surfacing. Because while David Beckham built his empire on discipline and Victoria Beckham perfected image control, Brooklyn Beckham's brand has always leaned experimental. And experimentation is thrilling. Until you marry into structure. Meanwhile, back in Beckham territory, silence has grown strategic. No public counterattacks. No emotional interviews. Just composed distance. Which some interpret as maturity. And others interpret as quiet devastation. Online debates have exploded. Is Brooklyn Beckham evolving? Or being absorbed? Is Nelson protecting his daughter's future? Or tightening influence over a young man still finding his footing? Even financial analysts, yes, financial analysts, have weighed in on talk shows, discussing inter-family brand dynamics as if this were a corporate acquisition. Because when two empires collide, the narrative becomes bigger than romance. It becomes about power consolidation. And then, perhaps the most telling development of all, Brooklyn Beckham's old circle has reportedly shrunk. Childhood connections fading. Industry friends drifting. Replaced by a tighter, more curated network. Isolation? Or intentional filtering? A former Academy associate from Queen's Park Rangers allegedly commented, "Brooklyn always wanted freedom. But freedom doesn't mean cutting every tether." That line hit hard. Because if this entire saga is about independence, the optics are complicated. Since stepping deeper into the Peltz family system, Brooklyn Beckham appears more protected, more insulated, less exposed to criticism. But protection can feel like control when it becomes total. Now let's address the elephant in the mansion. Nelson Peltz's reputation in corporate arenas is legendary. Calculated, strategic, unapologetically disciplined. Men like him don't gamble on instability. So if Brooklyn Beckham is now part of that ecosystem, questions arise naturally. Is he being shaped into something more focused? Or something more compliant? Because here's the uncomfortable truth about power: it doesn't always dominate. Sometimes it refines. And refinement can feel like empowerment. Until you realize you didn't choose the blueprint. Public sentiment remains divided. Half the audience applauds Brooklyn Beckham for breaking from dynasty expectations. The other half worries he traded one influence for another, just with better architecture. And the loudest question echoing across digital platforms right now? If Nelson Peltz truly stepped in, what exactly did he step in to fix? Because reputations don't crumble overnight. They shift when perception shifts. And perception shifts when power rearranges itself behind closed doors. Right now, Brooklyn Beckham stands at the center of two opposing narratives. Independent man rewriting his story, or strategic asset inside a billionaire framework. Which one is true? That depends on who controls the next move. And if history has taught us anything about Nelson Peltz, he rarely moves without already knowing the outcome. But what happens when outcomes involve family, legacy, and identity? That's where this stops being gossip and starts looking like a power realignment. And trust me, the consequences of realignment are never small. Because when empires adjust their grip, someone always feels it. And in this case, that someone might be Brooklyn Beckham himself. And here's where the temperature really drops. Because power struggles don't explode all at once. They suffocate slowly. And right now, the air around Brooklyn Beckham feels thin. Behind the polished appearances and carefully worded statements, insiders are whispering about something far more serious than social media tension. They are whispering about permanence. Because once reputations shift in elite circles, they don't just bounce back.
They recalibrate permanently. And the most chilling part? Nobody's raising their voice. Not David Beckham.
Not Victoria Beckham. Not Nelson Peltz.
Silence.
Strategic, suffocating silence. Which makes one thing crystal clear: this is no longer emotional.
It's structural.
Sources close to the Beckham family suggest that legal advisors have quietly reviewed brand protection strategies.
Not lawsuits.
Not public counters. Just protection. Protection of legacy.
Protection of image. Protection of future partnerships.
When a dynasty starts thinking about protection instead of reconciliation, that's when you know the shift is serious.
Because empires don't fear gossip. They fear instability.
And Brooklyn Beckham's public pivot has introduced exactly that: unpredictability. Meanwhile, inside the Peltz family circle, the mood reportedly feels different.
Confident. Measured.
Almost victorious. One anonymous guest at a recent Peltz-hosted private summit allegedly overheard a comment that sent shockwaves through certain circles. In the long run, alignment always wins over emotion.
Alignment. There's that word again.
Not love. Not unity.
Alignment.
Which raises a dangerous question.
Was Brooklyn Beckham aligning with Nicola? Or aligning with Nelson?
Because in high-powered ecosystems, the difference matters.
And then came the financial chatter. Not scandals. Not fraud. But positioning.
Investment insiders speculate that Brooklyn Beckham's future ventures may now be structured under tighter advisory frameworks, partnerships vetted, projects analyzed, risk minimized.
On the surface, that sounds responsible. But critics argue something else entirely.
They argue that when creativity becomes filtered through billionaire caution, authenticity starts to erode. Is Brooklyn Beckham becoming sharper?
Or just safer? Public reaction has intensified.
Commentators dissect every appearance.
Every quote. Every pause. Was that hesitation genuine? Or calculated? Is that confidence organic?
Or rehearsed? And perhaps the most uncomfortable theory gaining traction online: what if Brooklyn Beckham didn't lose control? What if control was never his, it just changed hands? Because here's the truth about legacy families and billionaire empires: they don't operate on impulse.
They operate on leverage.
David Beckham built influence through global admiration. Nelson Peltz built influence through strategic dominance.
Both worlds are powerful.
Both worlds are controlled.
And Brooklyn Beckham? He's standing at the intersection. But intersections are dangerous places.
Especially when traffic is moving in opposite directions. Whispers from former Beckham insiders claim the emotional toll has been heavy, not dramatic public meltdowns, but quiet heartbreak. Because when a son distances himself not just physically but narratively, the wound isn't loud.
It's lingering.
Still, the Beckham family has refused to retaliate publicly. Which, in power terms, is fascinating.
Because silence can be patience.
Or it can be calculation. Are they waiting for Brooklyn Beckham to return? Or waiting for the Peltz strategy to overextend? Meanwhile, Nicola Peltz remains steady.
Unshaken. Supportive.
Which fuels yet another online debate. Is she the bridge between worlds? Or the anchor pulling Brooklyn Beckham deeper into one? And hovering above it all like a chess grandmaster who never touches the board directly? Nelson Peltz.
No interviews. No statements.
No defensive press. Just continued expansion of his corporate empire. Which might be the loudest statement of all.
Because men like Nelson don't react to headlines. They outlast them. But here's the twist nobody's ready for.
What if this isn't about domination at all?
What if this is about identity?
Brooklyn Beckham has lived his entire life inside constructed narratives.
Golden heir. Legacy prince. Creative rebel. Now independent husband.
Every version shaped by external expectations. So maybe this rupture, this reputation crumble, isn't destruction. Maybe it's demolition before reconstruction.
But demolition is messy.
And when you demolish inside two of the most powerful families in elite society, debris doesn't fall quietly.
It trends. Sponsors reportedly hesitate.
Collaborators reportedly reassess. Not cancellations.
Not blacklists.
Just caution. Because in luxury markets, perception is everything. And right now, Brooklyn Beckham's perception is divided.
Half revolutionary. Half reckless. And division weakens brand stability.
Financial commentators have even speculated, purely hypothetically, about long-term impact on interfamily ventures. Could future collaborations freeze?
Could legacy endorsements shift?
Could loyalty be quietly reevaluated? No confirmations.
Just speculation.
But speculation, when attached to empire-level names, spreads fast. And here's the question burning through elite circles right now. If Brooklyn Beckham ever wanted to recalibrate again, could he? Returning to the Beckham fold wouldn't just require forgiveness.
It would require narrative reversal. And narrative reversal at this scale is complicated.
Especially if Peltz alignment has already solidified. Because here's the brutal reality about power ecosystems. You can't serve two thrones indefinitely. Eventually, you must choose.
And Brooklyn Beckham appears to have chosen. The only problem?
Choices made under pressure echo longer than expected.
So what happens next?
Does Brooklyn Beckham double down, proving critics wrong, building a focused, undeniable brand under Peltz precision? Or does the pressure of constant scrutiny fracture the carefully constructed independence narrative?
One thing is certain. This isn't fading.
It's evolving. And in elite power wars, evolution is never accidental.
Somewhere behind marble walls and glass boardrooms, strategies are being drafted. Statements measured. Moves calculated.
Because reputations don't just crumble. They are reshaped.
And reshaping can either forge steel or expose cracks.
Brooklyn Beckham wanted autonomy.
He demanded narrative control.
But when billionaires enter the equation, control becomes relative.
So now the world watches. Not for drama. Not for gossip. But for the next move.
Because in a battle between dynasty legacy and corporate empire, the quietest player often wins. And right now, the quietest player
is Nelson Peltz.
So now I'm going to ask you something nobody in the Beckham family, and nobody inside the Peltz family, once asked out loud.
Was this really about love?
Or was this about power consolidation disguised as independence? Because if Brooklyn Beckham truly took control, why does every move since feel strategically absorbed into a bigger machine?
Why does every silence feel calculated?
Why does every appearance look polished,
but never peaceful? Think about it. A legacy son steps out. A billionaire father steps in.
And suddenly the narrative shifts from emotional tension to structural dominance. Coincidence? Or choreography?
Drop your honest opinion below.
Did Brooklyn Beckham break free from the Beckham family? Or did he simply trade one throne for another? And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. If Nelson Peltz really is the quiet architect behind this shift, what happens next? Does David Beckham respond?
Does the dynasty retaliate?
Or is the real war happening behind closed doors while we're distracted by surface headlines? Because trust me, power families don't collapse loudly. They reposition.
So tell me in the comments, is Brooklyn Beckham a mastermind? A pawn? Or a prince who underestimated the board?
If you made it this far, you already know this story is bigger than a family feud.
Hit like if you believe there's more going on behind the scenes.
Subscribe if you want the next layer before the media spins it safe. Because this is just the version they are comfortable letting you see. And the real story might be quieter and far more dangerous.